we found that was a detriment to somebody that was writing or trying to write something of musical merit. And I remember telling Chris when we got ready to do the second record, I said, you know what? I busted my butt writing those lyrics on that first album. I ain't doing it again. I'm just slapping down whatever happens. And I sat down to try to do it, and I couldn't do it. You know, I had to do what I thought was right. And it took about 5 years for those things to start catching up to us. But it was worth it in the end, because as far as I'm concerned, and what I hear from you guys, that's one of the things that's the foundation of what we do.
Fuck yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. Circus. Circus was
Electric
a tired
Circus.
record done by a tired band. We had been on the road for 3 years at that point, and we did the European tour of Maiden, and Maiden felt the same way about Somewhere in Time. Both of us were out there touring records we didn't believe in, but we had been worked to a frazzle at that point. And I'm not blaming anybody for it. We did what we wanted to do. I mean, there was one point on that tour, we did 29 days in a row. We had one day off and did another 16 in a row.
Fuck.
And that was our life for about 3 years. And so we got done with that tour. I did not know who I was, because as I was saying to him, who you are now is not who you're going to be 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
And when we got finished doing those 3 years, I woke up one day and I did not know who I was. And I did an interview with Hip Parader magazine, and I was not trying to sell anything. I wasn't trying to hype anything. I just said what was on my mind. And I just, basically it was a bitch fest to make myself feel better, you know? But the editor called me about 6 weeks after the article came out, and he says, we've never received more mail over any interview we've ever done than this one. He says, I'm going to send you a sampling of these letters and let you see for yourself. So he sent me about 100 of them, and they all said the same thing over and over again. We knew you were thinking this. What took you so long to say it? Now, that's coming from you guys. So, have you ever had a situation, and I'm sure you've all had it, where you've had a situation in your life where you were thinking something already and you were pretty convicted about you wanted to do it, and then 2 or 3 people came along in your life and said, you know, this is what you should be doing? That's the push off the edge that you need. And when that happens, you go, I'm doing this. I wrote Headless Children after that. Headless took us in a totally different direction. When Capitol heard the early demos of it, they said, this is not the record you should be doing. You should be making Wild Child Part 2 or I Want to Be Somebody Part 2. And I said, that's not who I am right now. I can't do that anymore. So we followed the direction we felt was best for us. And quite honestly, that record, we broke away from the pack early on from the rest of the bands that were our peers at the time. Had we not broken away from the pack, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now.
Nice.
We're doing an anthology that's going to come out in 24, but there's going to be some stuff that you guys don't even know about that's on it. We demoed the first record 3 times before we recorded it, because labels, when you sign with them, they want to own the masters, so they want you to re-record it again. So by the time we got to the first album, because we had demoed it 3 times, you kind of start to lose a little enthusiasm because you've done it so many times. What people are going to hear, especially by the time we got to the second set of demos, we archived everything over the summer. We restored everything digitally. And I had not heard that stuff since we did it. They are vicious.
Oh, yeah.
Quite honestly, they are better than the first album. Knowing what I know now, I would have refused to re-record that record for Capitol. We would have put the demos out. The demos are that good. So we think you guys will be pleasantly surprised. When we first started, the one question we kept hearing over and over again was, so do you think the band will be around in 5 years? And at that point, I thought the press was picking on us. you know, why do you keep asking this question? Shit, man, I don't know if we're going to last 5 months. You know, it's like, we just got here. Can we enjoy this for 5 minutes?
Seriously.
You know, well, what I didn't know was they do that to every new band.
Right.
You know, it's a stock question. And when it happened, like I said, I thought they were singling us out. But no one can predict that. As a matter of fact, you know, I'm going to mention it up here tonight. Tomorrow night on Halloween. Well, no, excuse me.
Devil Day or Devil
Right.
Night.
It's tonight.
It's tonight is the 40th anniversary of both us, Ann Arbor, and Saint playing the Troubadour together for the first time.
Hell yeah.
The chances of one band lasting 40 years is impossible. Two bands playing together again on the same night 40 years later, the planets have to align.
Exactly. Yeah. No shit, man.
My mom always had music around the house. And so I grew up with, my mom was from Houston originally. So she was a Southern girl. So I had country western, huge Elvis fan. You know, so I grew up with him, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, all that stuff. Then we moved to New York when I'm 7. The Beatles come out a year later, and that was an earthquake.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it changed everything, you know. So I would say it's not any one single thing, but it's an amalgamation of all of those things. You put them in a pot and stir them up, and you get me. I have some actor friends. I won't name who they are, but I've been places at times, and people will see us together in a restaurant, and they'll look at one of us, and they'll look at the other one, and they're looking at it like, "What's wrong with this picture?" You know,
Heaven and hell.
you know, it's other professionals respecting each other. You know,
Hell yeah.
Just people. Yes, sir.
Blackie, have you ever been to Camp Verde, Arizona? It's kind of
Yes.
and do you know anybody there? I've seen some pictures of you and George Lynch a long time ago at some place up there. This girl.
I tried to move to Arizona about 6 times.
You did.
We actually did move to Sedona for about 4 or 5 months. And after we made the Crimson Idol, we tried to move out here in '92. We bought a place up in Carefree, and it burned down 3 days before escrow closed.
Oh my God.
We had the studio moved out here, all our furniture, everything was in storage.
Wow.
But it wasn't just that. It was one disaster after another. And it was like something was telling me, you are not supposed to be here.
Was this in the 80s?
No, it was 92.
Oh, 92.
You know, so we packed everything up and went back to California. I tried it again 2 or 3 more times, and it just has not worked.
Well, thanks for at least coming
You
to
know,
play here. And
I
then,
love it. I mean, Carefree up there,
Yeah.
before it started to get big, that was my favorite spot on
and
earth.
Sedona, you love that too? Up there?
Sedona, yes, but Carefree was where my heart was.
With Trick or Treat the movie, I heard you were originally cast or asked to do Sammy Kerr. Is that
Yeah.
true? And why did you, if you did, why did you
Penelope
deny the
Spears
role?
was going to direct it. She did Wayne's World and all that stuff later. She came to me with a script, and it sucked. You know, quite honestly. And I asked her, I says, "What do you think?" She goes, "It stinks." And I says, "Well, how about a rewrite?" So they did a rewrite, and it still stunk in a different way. So it took years to get it made. The movie, when it was finally made, I thought was okay.
Yeah, because I thought
know.
you would have made the bitchin' Sammy Kerr
Well,
myself.
Somebody asked me that yesterday. I said, we had an agent at the time, but all I kept getting offered was axe murderer parts.
I wonder why.
I said, I don't want to be an axe murderer. You know, it's like to do something else. I've been scouted by a bunch of teams. I had a chance to go play for the Reds minor league team. The last game I played, I was 17. I was at a point where I was going to have to make a decision. It was music or this, right? Or baseball. So the team that I was playing for, we were playing in a city tournament game. We got pretty high up, going to state level. And I was pitching. But about a week before the game, I was warming up in the bullpen, and I pulled a rib cage muscle on my right side, and it was really bad. So I didn't want the manager to know that I was hurt because I wanted to start that game, right? So I taped myself up real tight with an ace bandage, and my control wasn't very, very good. First guy I walked on four pitches. Second kid comes up, and I thought, that's it. Now, before that happens, there's a scout from the Mets has come in the dugout, and he's asking me all my vital stats, height, weight, you know, all that stuff. They want to know everything about you. So he's writing it all down. He's sitting right behind home plate. This second kid comes up to bat. I threw the hard, because at 17 I was already in the low 90s. So I uncorked probably the hardest pitch I've ever thrown in my life. Hit that kid square in the side of the neck, and he went down like he'd been shot with a gun. And he didn't get up. He just laid there. I thought, oh shit, this kid's dead. Right? And I looked where the scout from the Mets, he had a briefcase. He took his files, he packed them up in his briefcase, and he slowly walked out of the ballpark. And I thought, well, I ain't playing for the Mets. And obviously I did. I was in New York, and they were playing Tommy at Radio City. And when the record went gold, I presented him with for The Real Me, I presented him with his record. And so we talked for about 45 minutes that night, and I told him the idea I had, and he basically kind of patted me on the head and said, yeah, it sounds like a great idea, go for it. You know, and I didn't realize later when he did Quadrophenia, he had a nervous breakdown. I found out what the stress was all about later. And I wrote him another letter after it was done, and I said, well, you told me a little bit, but you didn't tell me everything. So now we know. You ever been in a bad relationship?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes go back for seconds.
Twice he left the band. He was never fired. He left on his own accord. If you were in a relationship and the woman left you one time, would you take her back? If she left you twice, would you take her back? You just answered my question. I was out here trying to find a place to live and carefree.
Yeah.
My back went out. And so when we made the Blind in Texas video, I had the same problem happen. We were down in Old Tucson filming. And so we're doing the scene with a rattlesnake. And that rattlesnake was from me to you. And he was real close. And if you've ever heard one up close, you never forget that sound.
Oh,
right?
I have, yeah.
Now my head is down and I can't see him, but I can hear him. And the director keeps saying, you got to get closer, you got to get closer. I'm saying, fuck you, you get closer.
Chills up your spine.
I do the scene where I collapse on the ground. There was a rock about this big, and it went into my rib cage, and it threw a rib out in the back. So I'm telling you all this story to tell you this.
Yeah.
We limp along for 9 months. I'm seeing chiropractors every day, can't find anybody. I find a thing called a kinesiologist, which is kind of like a chiropractor, but it's more like acupressure. So I found another one out here in Arizona, and he was a wizard. He's passed on now, but the guy, he helped me tremendously. Right around the time I was getting ready to make that record, I would talk about rattlesnakes. I could not pick up a guitar for 6 months. I'd walk by it and be in the corner, and it was like a snake. I didn't even want to touch it.
Wow.
So my back was out one day, and I went to see this guy, and he taught me a method about how to get into your head to find the truth from the non-truth. And we did some testing on me, and come to find out, I was so influenced by what had happened with the Crimson Idol, I didn't think I could top it. But subconsciously, what you start to think is, if I don't do anything, I can't fail. Well, we know consciously doing nothing is failure. So he helped me to see that the shadow of that thing was still being cast on me. So kind of when I got ready to do that record, I thought, you know what? I just got to do it. Whatever happens, happens. If it's not as good as what I just did, then that's just the way it is, you know? So you say damn the torpedoes and go for it.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Drunk in New Orleans. It was no more complicated than that. We were down on Bourbon Street, and I saw some cool shirts, and I'll have that. Well, I remember when we did the first tour, everybody's talking about the show. Okay, we understood. But we kept telling people, you know, we think that record is pretty good. You know, and when we come on the radio in your car, we can't jump out of the speaker on the dash and start doing that show.
That's right.
You know, that music has to stand up on its own.
And it has.
Away from the show. Well, yeah, but they were even the journalists were blinded by that show. And I'll tell you a funny story. We didn't understand how intense that show was. We really didn't. It took about 5 years, and we had done the Live at the Lyceum video already, and we were just starting to make Headless. And I went into a bar one night, and the video was playing in there. And I saw us for the first time like other people had seen us. Because my head was already in a different place at that point to make Headless, right? And I looked at us on that TV, and I was stunned by what I saw. And I thought, oh shit, no wonder these people were getting bent out of shape. You know, because what I saw when I looked at it? I saw a band that was being brutally honest, that did not give a damn and was taking no prisoners.
Fuck yeah.
But that, we didn't understand that at the time. We were just being ourselves.
Yep.
You know, but when we saw the viciousness of what was coming, that's what scared people about us.
What did you think about it when you saw yourselves for the first time?
I was shocked.
But did you like it?
I was stunned. I didn't have, it wasn't I liked it or didn't like it. I was just, because I was a different person already. At that point, I was seeing it like other people might see it. You know, so it was, you know, that's another difficult thing. I mean, we've not, any band, I don't care who the band is, if they get a good offer from a promoter, they're going to go. You know, that's what happened here in America. We just didn't get any good offers for a long time. So if the right opportunity presents itself, it would be wonderful to go back. I mean, it's been 25 years since we've been there. You know, we went to Japan, or I went to Japan probably a dozen times in the first 5 years. So to have it be almost taken away from us for a really long time, we miss it. We'd love to go back. But like I said, it's going to be up to a promoter to say yes. Go back and look, well, the video will be playing tonight. When I ride up, when it gets dark, when I ride up on the bike, you see my breath coming out of my nose. Yeah. The girl that was in the video, she also did Blind in Texas. She was from here in Arizona.
Okay.
She actually had been Miss Arizona. And so the poor thing, we're out there trying to shoot. She was freezing the whole time. So we'd have to do a scene, get her on the bus, get her warmed up, and then go back out again. So it was really cold out there. Well, it's high desert, you know, the Mojave Desert out there.
Yeah,
So
I used to live out there. So.
we were right by Edwards Air Force Base where they land the shuttle and all that stuff. 3-Day Bob. I nicknamed him that because, well, first of all, he was an extraordinary talent. I'm not saying this because he's gone. I miss him. You know, and selfishly, I miss his talent. Where Fort Apache was on the corner of Santa Monica and Vine when it was originally built. The Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where a lot of celebrities are buried, is 1 block away from there. And Bob's buried in that cemetery. And I was looking at a map the other day. There's a tribute that we do tonight of some of the guys that have been in the band. You'll see it on the screen tonight. And I was looking at pictures of Bob, and I thought when we were in there making that record, to think that this guy that I'm sitting in front of is going to be a block down the street before his time. That's tough. Extraordinary talent. I mean, he learned a lot. He told me from when he played with Alice Cooper, he also played with Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner, those 2 guitar players. And Bob was chameleon-like. He was a sponge. He could absorb other people's style. Doug is like that, our guitar player. Doug emulated Bob's licks on Re-Idolize. That ain't easily done, you know. But Bob was another one of those guys. He could watch somebody do something, he could absorb it, and literally become a carbon copy of it. Very few people can do that. I'd love to tell you some glamorous story, but it's way more simple than that. One of the guys that used to work for us, his father had a wood shop and a metal shop. So he had a complete working shop, and we built all of our early props there. We built the sign, the rack, all that stuff. And one day we were working on a table saw, and they had to change one of the blades, and they took the blade and they put it in a windowsill, propped it up against the window. And I just looked over at the blade, and it just popped into my head, and I started laughing.
Hell yeah.
And the guy that I was with, he goes, "What's so funny?" I go, I either the best idea in the world or the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard. And so I told him, he starts laughing. So we take a piece of cardboard, we make a cardboard template, cut it out, and start trying to fit it in, right? It wasn't until the very first night we used them, because I remember I was in the dressing room and I'm thinking, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. I'm going to get laughed out of town, because there's a very fine line between something that can be really good and something really stupid.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't know what was going to happen, so I got my courage up, put them on, and went out there. And within 2 minutes, you could see the looks on people's faces. We knew immediately.
Fuck yeah.
We had struck pay dirt.
It
But
was
I would
serious.
love to sit here and tell
We
you
love it.
it was some genius plan. But, you know, Ringo used to say there's nothing like a good mistake. It was extraordinary, you know. I've talked about it before, but him and I used to talk about a thing called a toolbox. And what that meant from a musician's lingo is, like, when you grow up playing in top 40 bands, you have to learn to play a lot of other people's styles. And we would take stuff, and you find some musician that does something different than anybody else, and you take his stuff and you put it in your toolbox. And you keep doing that enough times. You know, the question I got from him earlier, you know, the influences, you know, who's your favorite guitar player? I don't think there is a such thing, but you take them all and you put them all together. Frankie and I used to talk about the toolbox all the time. And when we did the Idol, the one thing that and I did this with Bob too, we sat down and we talked and we said, we don't want to put one gratuitous note on this record. Not one. We're not going to sit up and do a bunch of licks that are meaningless. We're going to make every note count on what we do. So Frankie and I approached the drums as if we were going to reinvent the wheel. One of the first things we did was Chainsaw Charlie. And so me, not being a drummer, I don't think like a drummer. I think of a guitar player. But a lot of times guitar players will suggest things that are virtually impossible. I mentioned Ringo just a second ago. There's a funny story that John Lennon brought a record in for Ringo to hear, and he let him listen to it, and he says, "So, you got that?" And Ringo says, "Yeah." And he goes, and John says, "Well, I want you to play it just like that." And Ringo says, "Well, that's great, John, but there's two drummers playing on that track." And he says, "Well, don't let that bother you." You know? Well, that was my approach with Frankie. You know, I would suggest ideas. When we got into the verse in Charlie, I said, "I want you to do this thing on the hi-hat, and then I want you to do this on the snare drum." And first thing he says to me, he goes, "It can't be done." And I said, "Well, what? Just try it." He goes, "It can't be done." I said, "Just try it." You know, so we go back and forth for 2 minutes arguing over that. So he sits in there, and I go back in the control room, and I'm watching him through the glass. And he's in there fumbling around, right? And he's getting close. He's modifying my idea, but he's getting close to what will work. He gets mad, he throws his sticks across the room, gets up, walks around the room for a minute, and I can see the wheels turning in his head while he's doing it. Finally, he comes back, and he starts getting it. Now, what he did was not exactly what I asked him to do, but it became a modification of the idea, so we therefore ended up with something different out of that. As a matter of fact, the intro to Charlie, where you hear it going right in the beginning, I'm holding a bass guitar. I'm holding the note. Frankie is playing the sticks on the bass guitar, getting it click, 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 click.
What?
You know, so the next time you hear that record,
Whoa.
we were trying to reinvent everything.
That's
going
cool.
into that record.
Okay.
Saying we got to go.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Blackie.